Hello, hello. Good morning, good morning. What's going on, good peoples? Coming to you for another video with the sensei. Today we'll be doing solving and graphing linear inequalities. All right, now the good thing with the solving and graphing linear inequalities is it's pretty much stemming from our last unit, which deals with solving linear equations. You'll notice that these problems look a lot similar to the last things that we were doing. The only difference is instead of having equal signs, you'll be having inequalities. So when you think of that word inequalities, you got greater than or less than, okay? Then you got greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. So these signs will basically be taking the place of an equals. All right, so first we're going to start it off with some basic one-step equations. Okay, so for this first one, it says 15 is less than x over 4. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, nothing can be simplified, right? Thinking of it similar to how we do with solving equations. So we can go ahead and make our four-way stop. Okay, so remember, our first quadrant that we'll start in is wherever our variable is. So since our variable is here, this will be considered our first quadrant. Okay, so remember, a fraction is the same thing as what? A fraction is the same thing as division. So if I'm trying to get rid of this, I'm going to use the inverse of division, which is multiplication. So we're going to multiply x over 4 times a whole number of 4. When I do that, it's going to get rid of my denominator. Okay, basic algebra rules. What I do on one side of the inequality or equals, I have to do to the other one. Since I times by 4 here, I would times by 4 here. Okay, I can bring that x down, keep this inequality, and then 4 times 15 will give us what? Okay, that will give us 60. Okay, now for our answer, that would have given us 60 is less than x. Okay, but the next part of this, what we're going to do is we're going to graph it. Okay, so when you're dealing with graphing inequalities, you want to try to have your variable first, and I'll explain it a little bit further. Okay, so if I'm wanting to do 60 is less than x, but I want my variable to go first, that really is the same thing as x is greater than 60. Okay, so you want your variable to go first, and what that does is it makes it a lot easier for you to graph. So let's say I got 50 here, I got 55, I got 60, and we can say 45, and we can say 40. Oh, get that thing out of here. Okay, so let's go back to when we're dealing with inequalities. Okay, now when I'm graphing these, I got greater than or less than. When I'm graphing an inequality and it's greater than or less than, you want to use an open circle. Okay, when I'm graphing an inequality and it's greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, you're going to use a closed circle. Okay, so for this one, x is greater than 60. Okay, I will use an open circle. And then since my variable is first, when I'm graphing my inequality, whichever way the inequality is pointing is where you shade. So we will shade everything to the right. So it'll look like that. Okay, how you feel about that? All right. Now for this next one, we got negative 2x is greater than or equal to 28. Okay, so same thing. If I was to start with my four-way stop, because there's nothing that can be combined at that point. Okay, remember, a number and a variable, if I bring those two together, what operation is that? Okay, the only way that I can bring a number and a variable together is to multiply. The inverse or opposite of multiplication would be division. So I'm going to divide by negative 2, get rid of that coefficient. I'm going to divide by negative 2. All right, here's where they throw a wrench a little bit when you solving inequalities. If you multiply or divide by a negative number, you got to flip your inequality. So since we divided by negative 2 on both sides, we're going to flip this inequality of greater than or equal to less than or equal to. Then what is 28 divided by a negative 2? That's negative 14. Good job. Okay, so that will give us x is less than or equal to negative 14. So if I put negative 14, negative 15, negative 13. Okay, so a couple of things. My variable is first, so that means my inequality is pointing to the left, so I can shade everything to the left, right? And then it's greater than or equal to. which means that my circle would be open. So that would be an open circle. Then I would shade everything to the left. So that's how I would solve and graph just some basic one-step inequalities. Okay, how you feel about that? Pretty good. All right, now let's go do a few two-step inequalities. Okay, so for this first one, we got -5 times p minus 5 is greater than -30. Okay, now what's this called when I got a number outside of a parentheses? Okay, that's called distributive property. So you gotta take that number outside the parentheses and distribute it to both of your values within the parentheses. Okay, so I got -5 times p, which is -5p. And then what's a -5 times a -5? That's a +25. And then that is greater than -30. Great job. Okay, so I've distributed. Okay, I can't combine any of these terms. So we can go ahead, use our four-way stop to solve. Okay, so now that we have our four-way stop, what's the first thing you want to try to do when you're dealing with multi-step or two-steps equations? I want to get this p by itself, right? But what's in the way? +25. So we're going to subtract 25. Then we're going to subtract 25 on this side. Okay. Once I do that, I can bring my -5p down greater than. Now, let's think about this one. We got -30 minus 25. Okay. You owe me $30. You owe someone else $25. So two negatives on opposite ends, you want to keep the sign and add them up. Basically, that's like saying that you're doubling the whole. So 30 plus 25 is 55, but it would be a negative. So -55. Okay, so if I got a -5p is greater than -55, I want to get this p by itself. Okay, I want to get the p by itself. A number and a variable together is multiplication. To undo that, we're going to divide. So divide by -5, divide by -5. When you're dealing with inequalities, if you multiply or divide by a negative coefficient or a negative number, okay, you got to flip it. So that would have been, I'll put it right here. P, that greater than is going to become less than. Now what's a -55 divided by 5? Okay, two negatives, multiply or divide is a positive. So that would have been +11. So the answer would have been P is less than 11. Okay, not too bad. So if I put 10 in the middle, put 11 here, maybe 12, put a 9. My variable is already first, so we can go ahead and shade it to whichever way it's pointing. So my inequality is pointing to the left, so we're going to shade everything to the left. Okay, if we have greater than or equal to, greater than or less than without any line under it, okay, that's going to be an open circle. Then I'm going to shade everything to the left. Okay, so my number line would look like that. What you think? Pretty good? All right, last one. We got -2 is less than or equal to x minus 3 over 7. Okay, so remember, I want to get this x by itself, but we're kind of in a conundrum here pretty much because our variable is within a fraction. Okay, so we can't simplify everything, so anything, excuse me. So we can go ahead and make our four-way stop, right? Okay, so we got to think. A fraction is the same thing as what? Division. So if this fraction is the same thing as division, I got to use inverse operations to get rid of this fraction. Focus on your denominator. Let's get rid of this. So if I times by a whole number of 7, that's going to get rid of my 7. Okay. What I do to one side of the equals, I have to do to the other one. Okay, so that would give us 7 times a -2, which is -14. Keep my inequality less than or equal to. Keep our numerator, which would have been kept as x minus 3. So all I did, using inverse operations, I got rid of that denominator. Okay, so then that left us with our numerator, x minus 3. Okay, so now still trying to get this x by itself, right? What can we do? Okay, we can add 3 to get rid of this extra number. What I do on one side, I do to the other one. Going to add 3. Now let's think. -14 plus 3. Okay, you owe me $14. You're still in the hole, but you gave me $3. Still owe me $11, right? But you're still in the hole. So negative 14 plus 3 would have been negative 11. It's less than or equal to x. Okay, so remember, especially when you're dealing with graphing on a number line, you're going to want your variable to be first. So it's kind of like you do the same thing, but you're going to flip it. So x, if negative 11 is less than or equal to, x is greater than or equal to negative 11. Okay, so if I put negative 10 in the middle, to the left is negative. It's negative 11. Remember, to the right is positive. That would have been negative 9. So it has a line under this inequality. Okay, so remember, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, you will have a open circle. There's going to be an open circle here. And then everything shaded to the right. All right. So that's just a few problems showing how we would solve and graph if we're dealing with inequalities. I'm going to be doing a few more of these problems, especially the multi-step ones. And I also will be dropping a video on how to write and solve inequality word problems. Okay. Appreciate you guys for taking some time and doing some math with me. Catch you all next time.